Good morning, Dan and Amy. And on Friday, upon that surprising jobs report, surprising to people who believe that incentives don't matter, like the president, I asked our friend Scott the Cowguy Shalady if it was now time to put all my money into Dogecoin, and he wouldn't answer my question because he would lose a number of licenses if he did answer the
Right.
question. So we got to go somewhere else for that answer, and that somewhere else is Abe Froman Jr. He is the director of operations at Digital Asset Redemption, and he is our cryptocurrency expert. So it seems like after the hammering the market took yesterday and the inflationary pressure that's come from a combination of funny money and lockdowns, good time to do a stop, look, and listen on crypto. Abe, if that is your real name, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yes, it is not my real name, and I should say that last time I was on your show,
You had a different name.
No, well, that was 2 times ago.
Oh, okay.
But I actually faked my own dad out. He called me afterwards to make sure I was okay because he's like, I had somebody else on the radio this morning. I'm like, no, Dad, that was me. He did not. He's not seen the.
He didn't know you were the
Ferris
sausage
Bueller.
king of Chicago.
No, and I'm no king. If you want a Bitcoin king, I can introduce you to him. I'm a.
Well, okay, so let's talk about Bitcoin. It's supposed to be an inflation hedge. That's one of the attributes that is promoted. And yesterday, upon the market tanking on the news of higher inflation than anticipated, so did Bitcoin.
Correct. So why?
How's that an inflation hedge?
Well, it's not an inflation head minute to minute or day by day or week by week.
Okay.
But it is over a period of time. I mean, there are only 21 million Bitcoin. So when you're handing out trillions of dollars left and right, it's eventually going to chase and it's going to run the price up. And if you look at the price of Bitcoin, you see tremendous volatility. And some people love that and some people are afraid by it. But over time, the volatility is always up and to the left. Or excuse me, up and to the right.
Up and to the right, yeah, right.
But it's so it's so I ask people when we first started talking about it is look at it as a multi-year, even an intergenerational type of a investment / bet, whatever you want to call it. So treat it like your 401k. If you're 20 years old, just say like I don't even care about this for 45 years because if I sit there and watch the price go up and down.
Yeah.
And there's interesting times too where you'll see the price of Bitcoin will follow the S&P or the Dow, and then there's times that it decouples from it, and there's no real rhyme or reason to it. It's the other thing to also understand is that Bitcoin is global, so people in South Korea don't care about what's going on in the United States when it comes to this kind of stuff. So you do get that decoupling motion happening from time to time.
And it is worth noting too on the inflation score, since that's dominating the conversation right now. Unlike our fiat currency, the government can't inflate Bitcoin. It can't distort the value of Bitcoin, as that's a true market value.
Right.
And that's why it's a hedge.
Right. And that's where it's kind of like, when people say, how could Bitcoin be worth $55,000 or 49 or whatever it is this very second, I always ask people, why does it take 49,000 of your dollars to buy one Bitcoin? It's really the same question. You just turn it inside out and you ask them the same question. It's like, well, when people ask me like, oh, who do you want to be president? I'm like, I don't care because, the Tea Party movement seems to be, maybe dead forever. But the whole idea of monetary or fiscal discipline is,
Yes.
So it doesn't really matter.
You're channeling Stanley Druckenmiller in the Journal this week.
Right.
With respect to Bitcoin, then, it seems to me one of the big problems is, and one of the reasons people are hesitant to place too much stock in it, literally and figuratively, is the network effect problem, right? People don't want to use it until people are using it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just took a hit yesterday with Elon Musk saying no more Bitcoin as payment for Tesla.
Right.
How significant is
that? None.
Not significant.
Not significant at all. It may be significant for 36 hours or, until the next news cycle's passed. But, when I saw that stuff from Elon yesterday, I'm willing to put a 1 Bitcoin bet that he could not pass a drug test this morning. It just literally makes so little sense of why he was even putting out that tweet, which is why the market is going to bounce right back really quickly. So I put zero stock in Elon Musk's opinion about Bitcoin because it's
Really?
constantly moving. And you would think a guy like that would be super smart about technology. And maybe he is, but maybe he can't pass a drug test this morning, too.
Wow. Okay.
And
How did you think he did on Saturday Night Live?
You
Was
know
he
what?
hopped up on drugs then
When
too?
you- when-
Adam, Scott, Jimmy,
No, when
Steve,
we-
what's your
drunk
name?
on Dogecoin is
Doge-
what he was.
Yeah, he bashed Dogecoin about 4 times.
I was painful. I tried to watch Saturday Night Live in order to prepare for this interview, and I just didn't get around to it.
Oh,
it
really?
is.
So-
That's right.
I'm
He-
sorry.
He just, I mean, the
But
point is,
Dogecoin's down because of his appearance and what he.
well, he just made a
know.
quip about it, saying that it's a
4
scam.
times. Right.
So-
it's a scam.
Yeah,
That's what
and
he said.
it is. And well, I shouldn't
Is
say
it
it
a
was a
scam?
scam. No, it was a joke. It was a dorm room experiment.
Right.
So a lot
Like
of these
Facebook.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, we talked last year about Facebook coming out with this whole idea of Libra coin and all that. I'm like, I love the idea of Libra coin. I would never touch it. It's going to be a terrible failure, but it's going to get literally billions of people involved in understanding this ecosystem. And when it does fail, the lessons will be learned as to why it failed. And that is why Bitcoin is kind of king of the crypto markets, because it doesn't have personhood. You can't arrest the founder of Bitcoin. You can't confiscate Bitcoin. You can go to Coinbase and you can put Brian Armstrong in jail, and then you could freeze all the funds inside of Coinbase. But if you're holding your own Bitcoin, it's no different than cash in a way. It's it's essentially impossible to confiscate unless it's at the end of a gun.
Yeah, but getting beyond Elon Musk and talking about this network effect problem, it doesn't it have limited upside if people do not want to use it for commercial transactions?
Not with Bitcoin. And let me explain that. People talk about it, and I really don't like the word currency, digital currency. It can be that, but it's just tokenized, units of value. And the nice thing is like Bitcoin, like with some of the stuff that I do with companies as we're doing pilot programs, it's like you might send $5 million to France in order to pay an invoice over a weekend, which you can do, and then they pay you back, next week and try to settle. It takes days, and sometimes things get lost. And you have to ask yourself, like, how in our traditional financial system, and I know it's been built up over hundreds of years, and they've got layers and layers of technology and all these other things, Bitcoin doesn't have that. So it's interesting in my world to be able to witness how terribly inefficient and how terribly expensive the traditional financial market is when compared to Bitcoin.
What
So
about-
there's value there. There's
what-
value to be able to pay invoices quickly. There's a lot of value there, which doesn't involve I'm not going to use it to buy, gum at the gas station.
And what about two other aspects of this? One is just in terms of, again, for people that have viewed this from afar, I buy, $5,000 worth of Bitcoin, so I buy a fraction of a Bitcoin.
Mhm.
Can I get in and out? So if it ticks up or if it ticks down, and I want to take my profits or minimize my losses, I can get right in and right out seamlessly.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, the entire crypto space is not that much different than the traditional financial space, where it's just bots fighting against other bots.
And it's a direct conversion to dollars into my account.
Absolutely. Now it would take time to move those dollars from, say, like a Coinbase or a Gemini or Kraken into your Chase or BMO Harris account in order to actually spend it. But that's an ACH transfer, so it's a couple days.
Okay.
And then you
But
pay
the
taxes
instant-
on it, right?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
Well,
and
like-
that's
with
another
every
any gain,
transaction,
like any
right.
game.
but there's another cool thing that's happening.
Ooh, tell us.
Yes, I will.
Is this just in?
It probably is for most people, but
Okay.
you look at the evolution of these ecosystems and these technologies, and you can start separating yourself from your own personhood. And the idea being is that I don't have to be a citizen of Illinois. I mean, I'm physically here, and I pay taxes here and all that, but I don't have to have my entire digital footprint or financial footprint to be in the United States or anywhere else.
Right.
And I'm only bringing this up to expand people's ideas around use cases around intergenerational wealth transfer. What does that mean? And I'm sure most of your audience would be sympathetic to the idea that we're hearing about a war on cash. What happens when there's a war on wealth?
Absolutely. Well, what happened? There is.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Right. No, I mean, I think that's a fair point, and it's a good attribute to raise. No question.
It's a huge attribute because think of it. Think 20, 30 years ago, people had Swiss bank accounts, but the only people that had them were the
Or
extremely
Uber.
wealthy.
Yeah.
Right now, when you cold store crypto, you have your own offshore bank, and you could be 16 years old and have your own offshore bank, essentially.
It's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
So you have to move to the Bahamas.
Why
You don't
the
even have to move there.
Right.
You could be there digitally.
So let's talk about Ethereum. So Ethereum is being promoted by many in this space, at least from what I've read, experts, and I'm not one, that this is going to be the ultimate winner in cryptocurrency. That the technology that supports Ethereum is superior, I guess, from a utility perspective to Bitcoin. Compare and contrast those two for us and the underlying blockchain technology.
So this is unfortunately just kind of like a general cultural thing, or call it our Twitter culture, where I have to be 100% right and I have to prove that you're 100% wrong. So you do have these, people that lock themselves into, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist or I'm an Ethereum maximalist, and you're wrong, and you get this back and forth.
Competition, right? Yeah.
Well, but it's also this weird thing about I have to be right because my ego depends on it.
Right.
So to me, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist.
Okay.
Okay.
Because there are things about Ethereum which are really cool and interesting, but the challenge that Ethereum is going to have is that it is designed to be something that's super cool, but it's also designed to be something that means something to too many people at too many different times.
Elaborate. What does that mean?
Like Bitcoin does one thing very simply, and at the end of the day, and I think we may have talked about this in the past, just in terms of the cool thing about Bitcoin is the decentralized governance of it. And once you start understanding why that's important, you'll realize that one of the challenges Ethereum has always had and will continue to have is the fact that they keep changing the rules of their system in order to be able to, quote unquote, evolve. But every time you evolve, you're leaving somebody behind. So you have to pick and choose losers in that system, where Bitcoin doesn't do that. It can't do that.
But I mean, what is the technology that has this broader application? It's always talked about in vague generalities.
Yeah.
The blockchain technology, the technology is the real value. The blockchain footprint or design for Ethereum is better or worse than the blockchain design for Bitcoin. People don't understand what that means.
Well, so one thing is that what made Ethereum so exciting when it came out is that it was a lot easier to code on, meaning that the 20-somethings coming out of school gravitated to Ethereum because it was easier. Water seeks its lowest point, and I'm not taking away from that, but that's where a lot of the development talent went in 2015, 2016. The thing that's interesting about Ethereum is that it has what's essentially called Turing complete software that sits inside the code. So that allows you to be able to make agreements and contracts with people, and then they self-settle. So you don't have to worry about, if you make a bet with somebody, like a sports bet, we don't have to worry about whether or not you think one team won or I thought another team won. It would just automatically settle. So the idea is that you could create this social ecosystem. And there's Ethereum, and then there's Cardano, and then Ethereum has about 25 different copycats that are trying to be like, we're the new Ethereum, we're the better Ethereum. I think at the end of the day, the first mover attribute of Bitcoin is going to make Bitcoin king because it does one thing, and it does one thing perfectly. And Ethereum's also going to survive and do very well going into the future because it has first mover status, and that's where the concentration of the software developers are spending their time developing Ethereum.
And so when people argue in terms of like Bitcoin and these other cryptos limited upside, that in order to maintain its attractiveness and its value and to increase, it has to simultaneously be fringe and mainstream.
Yeah, and that's the balancing act that Ethereum is always caught in, is because, if you talk to the original developers that launched the code, it was never meant to be currency. It was never meant to be a competitor of Bitcoin. It was meant to be something different, using cryptographic mathematics to do something more interesting or different. So the way that I kind of explain it to people is that Bitcoin's a lion and Ethereum's a shark, and they're both apex predators in their own environment, but they don't threaten each other because the shark swims and the lion doesn't. So that's, I think, a different way of thinking about it, where you don't have to say, like, I'm going to pick a winner. In fact, me personally, I've got interest in both. Like I want everybody to do well.
And you're not worried about big banks coming online with their own cryptocurrencies. You're not worried about the government moving in the direction of prohibition.
No, and that's kind of the interesting point of when you get into this space is you realize how little control that people really have. A U.S. dollar, Janet Yellen coin would scare the living daylights out of me. Because, and this is why China's actually doing it. There's a digital yuan, is that how you pronounce it? But the scary thing about that is that what the Chinese do to people they don't like. They can make you disappear.
Yeah.
And what if they could just make you financially disappear with with the stroke of a keyboard? And that's the scariest part about any government currency is the fact that, like, now you have that governance thing where in Bitcoin it's decentralized, nobody controls it. But in a government digital financial system, somebody controls it, or a group of people will control it. And you might be like, well, I trust these group of people today, but do you trust the group of people 20 years from now? So not just, look what Argentina's doing with their currency. You look at these currency failures all the time, and people are just pressing buttons and robbing people of their wealth.
And how secure are these crypto accounts at Coinbase or anywhere else in terms of the protection against hacking, the protection against disappearance, like you were talking about the Chi-Coms could do?
Mm-hmm. Well, in the United States, we obviously have a lot better legal system that has a lot of financial protections. That doesn't mean it's going to last forever. I like Coinbase enough. I like Kraken. I like Gemini. I don't really have a one U.S. exchange, but as a U.S. citizen, the on-ramps and off-ramps between your U.S. bank account has to go through only a few exchanges. I cannot go to Binance as an exchange because I'm an American, but I can go to Binance U.S., which is a much smaller version of their large exchange. But then again, at the end of the day, that's where I try to encourage people to just, if you're going to get as far as getting into the space, then take the next one more step to learn how to actually take custody and control your own crypto. Because at that point, you're going to realize that you're going to be able to over-collateralize loans in the future. The financial opportunities that exist in this space are so cool, and they're not that far off.
He is Abe Froman Jr., Director of Operations at Digital Asset Redemption. Abe, thanks for joining us again with another tutorial, trying to keep up to speed with this as best we can. We appreciate it.
Let's hang out more often.
Very good.
All right.
You've made the switch, and it feels so good. You've switched to Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.